Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, April 2nd, 2015. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. Well, this week we head up to Springdale, Arkansas to talk to Nathan Traw and Jesse Core about Core Brewing's distilling program. How is the process different for brewing beer? And how does it fit into Core's growing business? If you're new to home brewing or would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can follow me on Twitter. My username is Basic Brewing, all one word. We have a Basic Brewing Radio and Basic Brewing Video page on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing. We're on the Google Plus, too. Thanks to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. You know how it works. Whenever you have the itch to shop on Amazon, go to our website first, basicbrewing.com. Click on the Amazon logo on the right-hand side of the page. That'll take you back to Amazon, where you can shop to your heart's content. It won't cost you any extra. You'll be helping us to bring you the show, and we greatly appreciate your support. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site as well. You can find our Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes, our Android app on Amazon.com. We have a Windows Phone app. We're on the BlackBerry Podcast Directory. We're on the Stitcher app. We're just everywhere. If you want to put a tip in our tip jar, some coinage in our guitar case, you can go to basicbrewing.com/support. Thanks to everybody who's done so already. We're getting some really good entries, some really good stories for our contest to give away 2 free registrations to the National Homebrewers Conference coming up in June in San Diego. The AHA is donating the prizes, and Basic Brewing Radio and Beer and Wine Journal are giving them away to the 2 best stories of homebrew heroics. It's kind of along the lines of our, homebrew disaster theme, but it's the opposite, homebrew heroics. The contest is even open to those who have already paid to attend. So even if you're already registered for the conference out there in San Diego, you can get your registration fee back if you win the contest. So the prize covers full conference registration and banquet attendance as well. More details and the entry form are at beerandwinejournal.com. You have until April 10th to enter, and I'm looking forward to reading your stories of homebrew heroics. Like I said, we've got some good ones so far. Let's take a quick look into the mailbag. Jason from Gilmanton, New Hampshire, writes after listening to the Brewing with Maple episode. Jason says, I want to let you and your listeners know that maple supply companies, much like a homebrew shop, offer some pretty interesting things that brewers may want to attempt to acquire or try. For instance, my local maple supplier offers an amazing 35-gallon PET plastic barrel with a spigot that you can attach a stainless steel tri-clamp fitting to that is awesome for fermenting 25 to 30 gallons. Perfect for club events. It even has a large screw-on lid with a built-in airlock and relatively inexpensive at $95 to $100. You can even fit wooden barrel staves in it. Jason says, I'm going to use mine for a maple-aged beer. And for the really adventurous one, Jason says the maple evaporator pans, stainless with spigot, 15-gallon and up will make awesome cool ships or open-air fermenters. They also have numerous fittings, spigots, and gaskets that would definitely help a home brewer. Thanks, Jason. If you live up there in Maple Country, check that out. Or I'm sure that they're online, too, as well. It's always fun to find new stuff that can help in brewing as well as doing what the equipment's original intent was. Andrew from Marengo, Iowa writes, I've been meaning to write you and let you know of a piece of software that I guess I should have sent in for the show on brewing software. I was kind of surprised that no one else sent anything in about Biabicus. That's Biabicus, or maybe it's ACUS. I use this program all the time after learning about it from the show, combined with a basic brewing logbook, of course. I love that I can just start dumping water into the pot and then just measure with a stick how much I have put in. It gives great volume estimates for checking where things should be during a batch. Scaling is also super simple, not to mention that the program is free and comes with easy interaction on their forums and other users and the creators. I highly recommend it. Thanks, Andrew. Biabicus, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. was created by a brew-in-a-bag pioneer Pat Hollingdale, I believe. So that is an omission that shouldn't have been omissed. Now, now, we've covered a lot of ground in the interview today, so let's get right into it. Technically, this topic falls outside the focus of this podcast. I've waited 10 years to do anything about distillation because distillation goes beyond what is currently legal in the United States to do at home. However, it is becoming an extension of professional craft brewing, so if you're a home brewer and you plan on going pro, this is something that you might find yourself expanding into. Plus, I just like hearing about the science and art behind processes like this. So, the last time we talked to Nathan Traw, he was brewing at Apple Blossom Brewing in Fayetteville. But we caught up with him this week next to the still at Core Brewing in Springdale. Well, Nathan Traw, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thank you for having me on again, James.
You have moved. You used to be at Apple Blossom, and now you're up here at Core Brewing and Distilling.
Yes, sir. I really wanted to get involved in the distilling part, which is why you're here today, right?
Yeah, the biggest reason. I still want to talk about beer because, that's essentially what we're about.
Yeah.
So have you been able to, on the beer side, have you been able to kind of stretch your wings creatively as much as you were down at Apple Blossom?
Just due to the nature of the business, production brewery versus a pub, there is not as big of a creative outlet. It's more of a focus on staple brands that we can produce efficiently and timely and keep the shelves stocked. I will say, however, I do have a lot of creative freedom with the distilling since I'm the first distiller to grace Core Brewing Company. So the whole program is pretty much designed and implemented by me. And then, I have free liberty to change the recipes as needed. And then we have, a half barrel size pilot system. And so I run through that quite a bit. I'm playing around right now with some ciders. The Arkansas law just changed to allow native brewers to produce cider. And so the cider resources are very easy to get started. Brewer Supply Group makes concentrated cider, pretty much apple juice that you can add to it, whatever you like. And so that's how we're going to pick up and get started. There's been talks of like an apple orchard, and things like that, so we could source our own apples. Right now we're planning on an Arkansas Black / stock cider concentrate as our first cider that we hope to have rolling out here in the next couple of months. So that's pretty much all me. I made a Brett cider a couple of months ago, which we all loved in-house. And then I've got less tart options. We're kind of experimenting with small batch sour stuff as far as beer goes. And then, I just recently redesigned some of our beers. I managed to get a hold of about 700 pounds of Citra hops. And so our Easy Living is going to be noticeably different. That's a session IPA we produce. And it uses about 15 pounds of Citra, all in a hop bursting technique that Stone uses in their session IPA. So the 0-minute edition was, I think, 10 pounds of Cascade and 10 pounds of Citra, in addition to like 2 or 3 other less than 10-minute editions that we did at the end of that brew day. So it's really cool, and it hasn't been dry hopped yet, and we can go down and pull a sample, but I can smell the glass without it being dry hopped from at least a foot away. Everybody's really pumped up for that. And then waterfall wheat, and then all of our IPAs are going to utilize either Citra, or I've got some newer hops such as Jerry Lou, I believe is how you pronounce it. Mandarin, German Mandarin. We're kind of experimenting from Crosby Hops, their new selection of hops. So, it's pretty exciting. But to answer your question, Brewpub Brewing is its own, beast, and it's always fun, but Production Brewery has its own unique challenges, such as can and bottles, and that's where I'm wanting right now. So, is experience, basically more on quality control. That you kind of, some brew pubs have it, such as Oscar Blues, obviously, but mostly focusing on that area of expertise that I want to develop.
You were talking about apple cider. Northwest Arkansas used to be the biggest apple production region of the country way back in the day. I mean, they said that there were, it was nothing but solid apple, orchards all the way to Oklahoma, in West Washington County. And it's gotten to where it's not so much anymore.
Yeah.
But that would be really cool. There's a cidery that's set to open in Springdale as well. So it'd be really cool if the craft brewing industry were to bring back that heritage industry back to the state.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I forgot to mention a couple of things. We got so many cool. We're actually designing a proprietary yeast here at Core. Which is really interesting. We're working with a couple of PhDs from the University of Arkansas, kind of using some of their more sophisticated equipment. But yeah, we're just doing basic microbiology and forcing the yeast to sporulate and hopefully get some mating going on to some genetic exchange. We also, I managed to already start a sour proprietary strain. Actually, I isolated a pure culture of Brett Lambic that was just found growing wild. So that's really neat. It's got some, more horse blanket flavors, but the cherry pie is really exquisite. So I forgot to mention that. I can't believe I did. That's probably one of the cooler things. Cider production, it's going to be killer. Tart sours. There's plans for a dry hop cider. The possibilities are endless, just like beer. We're kind of working on controlling all aspects of our supply chain too, such as, I just ordered 20 rhizomes to start maybe like a pilot hop growing program. It's also going to be in conjunction with the university. And,
wow.
It's a lot of cool things going on. There's a lot of cool projects that are started that we're kind of still fleshing out. But it's definitely exciting. I've got some Centennial Cascade rhizomes, and we'll hopefully kind of breed some USDA stocks together and get some really cool hops out of them, just to have some uniqueness to our product. In addition to the ciders, I've got a apple masher that took some Arkansas Blacks and was doing the other day, which is pretty entertaining. But yeah, we're going to have a mostly Arkansas Black cider using some stock concentrate for now. And then when we can, secure a more stable supply line of fresh apples and definitely get something that can mash more than, 20 apples at a time would probably greatly speed up the process. Because 20 barrels of cider, that's a lot of apples. But yeah, it's a quick brew day. You just get the juice. And the literature I've read, you don't necessarily boil cider. You just kind of heat it up to pasteurize. Otherwise, it causes all the tannins to precipitate out and become cloudy. So it's not even a 4-hour brew day, which kind of takes me back. Making the distilling mash is also about a 4-hour brew day because there is no boiling involved of that mash either. So,
yeah, let's. We're standing here in front of the still, and there is a chain link fence in the building between the still and the brewing equipment, the beer brewing equipment, and that is a legal requirement, right? That you have to have a physical barrier, even though it's. It's just a fence, but you have to have a physical barrier between the distillery and the brew house. So describe your setup. What have we got here? Now, if I were walking in off the street and I didn't know what it was, I maybe wouldn't guess what it was, because it doesn't look like the stills in the backwoods or even the stills that we see in the fancy brew houses with the copper stills and all the little ports and all that. So what do we got?
So we have a hybrid pot column still, and there's actually just a regular pot column behind us. That's actually our pilot still. So it's about a 7-gallon kettle still. But hybrid pot, basically pot stills are your old school style stills, most likely the ones you'd see on like moonshiners. And kind of more the backwoods. That's all pretty much the kettle, and then the column here, condenser, which is just a stainless steel vessel with hollow tubes that the vapor is allowed to pass through. That's surrounded by water. So here, in about 12 degrees, we're sitting at 69 degrees Celsius right now. We'll actually turn the water on, and we'll actually have water going through, so that way we can pull enough cold water. We'll have a more stable water temperature. The hybrid portion comes from the deflagrator, which is that tube directly on top of the kettle. That knocks out any of the heavier elements, such as water, anything that has, a very high boiling point, it's going to knock it out pretty instantly, which is going to increase our proof by about 15 to 20%. Coming out of the still. This still is capable of doing officially 160 proof or 80% alcohol tops. I've pushed it to 180, and I've had 95% alcohol come out of it before. It's greatly influenced by the weather. So every distilling morning, I get up, I check the barometer readings, look at the weather forecast, even the wind chill. And try to guess, look at lake temperatures, try to guess like how cold the water is going to be coming into the facility. Because this past winter is when I hit 180, 185, 190 proof. Last week I was hitting 170, 165 proof. So it's all the difference is the weather and how cold that water is coming in. And so that greatly influences the amount of alcohol we get. And also, the mash, if you can make a solid mash, the rest of the whole process is just set in motion. Today we're making a whiskey. It's 51% corn, flaked corn to be specific, and then 48% Pilsner, and then a 0.5 to 2% of dextrin malt. So we're going to have a very sweet whiskey. Most distilleries actually don't use malted products. They use what we call off-grain, which is like raw wheat, spelt, rye. Actually, whiskeys that use 100% all malt are quite rare, and they're highly sought after. Because we already have it, it's not that big of a deal. But we could just easily go to the feed store and get some, human-grade quality corn, or just talk to, one of the many, wholesalers around here and just get corn by the bushel. And so craft distilling as an industry is a lot more profitable than straight up brewing, where you'll see like a 40 to 50% profit from a really good brewery with a solid supply chain. Distilling, you'll see closer to 110, 120%. However, you have no shelf life issues with distilled products. The big thing is, it doesn't turn over as fast. So a lot of people look at the numbers like, I can get so rich a lot faster, and I don't need half the equipment that I need for producing beer. And then they get to a situation to where it's, oh yeah, well my bottles, the case of bottles, it takes 3 weeks to move, whereas a case of beer takes a day or two.
If you're doing it right, you don't drink hard alcohol or hard liquor as fast as you do beer.
Yeah, exactly. And so kind of see our temperatures creeping up about 1 degree a minute right now, which is great. So how basically this process works, we bring the mash to a boil, and that in turn is going to create vapor, a mixture of water, alcohol, acetone, isopropyl. You guys out there that are pretty chemistry savvy, all the byproducts that the yeast produce in addition to ethanol and CO2 will actually come out in the distilled product as well. And so we bring it to a boil. That then heats up the rest of the system. And there's really 2 solid steps to the distilling process. There's a stripping run and then a spirit run. And then stripping run, it's just kind of balls to the wall. We get the mash in there, we heat it up as fast as possible, get it boiling, so the rest of the system gets warm, and then we start collecting that alcohol. And we try to do this as fast as we can, which is about 4 hours for the first run, and then once everything warms up, it's about 2.5 hours.
So in the stripping run, you're just getting the raw material, and in the second run, the spirit run, you're refining that into something more palatable or something more drinkable?
Yeah, so, I mentioned the other chemistry byproducts, things such as, acetone and isopropyl and methanol are the big ones. Also sulfur. Sulfur is a really big one. In fact, the reason why you see a lot of stills made of copper is because copper naturally removes sulfur gas from the product. So I'm going to open this up. You can actually see we've got copper rods in there because we obviously have a stainless steel distill. So there's just a food-grade copper tube in there that's actually over the next week and a half will scrub all the sulfur out of the distilled product here.
And we're leaning on a big plastic tank here.
Yeah.
And it does smell kind of eggy.
Yeah. So we call it baby farts. And actually this whole area will kind of fill up with that smell. Stainless steel stills are much easier to clean. They also last a lot longer due to that sulfur digestion process. Bits of the copper are dissolved. So really old stills, even old brewing equipment that's made out of copper, you'll see they'll have welders come in and actually add more copper to the outside. And so you get best bang for your buck with the stainless steel still. So once it boils, we've got a hydrometer here in the parrot, which is where the liquid will collect and come out at a very slow rate. It's kind of like a water fountain rate. You can kind of picture that. We've got a hydrometer that bobs up and down telling us the proof or the alcohol, which proof is just double the alcohol percentage. And we collect that in a 5-gallon bucket, and then we pour it directly into here. I've seen stills that have 3 compartments. So instead of using dripping into a bucket, it'll drip into compartment. And there's 3 compartments because here in the stripping run, it's not as essential in the spirit, but we have 3 stages of the actual spirit run. So there'll be 3 stages every time I repeat this process today. The first one is what we call the heads, the 4-shot. That makes up about 5 to 10% of our total volume of ethanol that's going to come out. And that's your acetone, your methanol. We collect all that. Today it'll be about 10 gallons from all the stripping runs I'm going to be doing today. And we utilize that as a cleaner. And actually I dumped 10 gallons here on the floor to kind of give the floor a nice polish. It evaporates because, again, it's mostly volatile organic solvents. And we can use it as a sanitizer. I use it in the lab in an alcohol lamp. I use it as a general basic cleaner, so it cuts down our cleaning chemical costs actually quite a bit for what we use it for. We can be as wasteful with it as we want because I produce 10 gallons 2 days a week. So I actually have 20 gallons of it in every container that can hold it. So that's your heads of your 4-shot. It's poisonous. It's what will make you blind if you have some bad moonshine, things like that. And then we get into our spirits. And so we get into our hearts, which is where your ethanol comes in. And there's 2 ways we distinguish between that kind of separation. One is vapor temperature. So the heads and the 4-shots actually boil off before ethanol. So we'll see them start to boil off around 76 all the way up to 80 degrees Celsius, which we'll be able to tell by the right-hand thermometer gauge that actually measures the vapor at the top of the column. The one on the left is what our kettle is sitting at with the liquid. So we'll be able to kind of tell there, and also by smell and taste. So you'll see me take my finger, put it up, splash a little bit on my tongue, and until the harsh alcohol flavor kind of goes away, then we start collecting. That's kind of a less vial divide. And any new distiller, I'll put them doing stripping runs because there's always a spirit run that can also remove that. It's really hard to mess up a spirit. You can't just be like, oh crap, I just put a ton of methanol in this product. Well, you just redistill it again. And so then we have what we call the tails. And tails are actually, they're not harmful, but they're a lot less palatable than pure alcohol. It's all of your higher chain elements, a lot of yeast esters, things like that. If we were making gin, or if we were making any kind of dry hopped whiskey, which you guys should pick up Derek Bell's Alt Whiskies book if that interests you. Corsair Distillery, I believe they're in Kentucky. They're known for making beer mash, such as imperial stout whiskeys, things like that. So they use all malt whiskeys and doing quite a good job with that. So tails is what makes a whiskey a whiskey. So if I was doing a spirit run today, you would see me actually turn the deflagonator water off, and we would allow some of those impurities to boil into the final ethanol product, and do that to capture enough, to create that harshness that everybody loves in whiskey, and that's really how you get it. But the distilleries that have the 3 compartments, each of those phases has its own compartment, and when those are full, that's when you empty them. So distillery will, distillery I have experience with in Montana. We had 6 8-barrel fermenters and what we call a reaction tank, which is essentially a mash tank. In distilling, we don't separate our grain from the wort. There is no water process. In fact, you ferment on the grain. There is no sanitation step because you're adding yeast to it. It's going to outpace everything within that 8-day period, and then it's going to be boiled. And so, yeah, it's kind of fun, especially if you're anal about sanitation as a brewer. You just come in, all these hoses and gaskets were clean, but I didn't spray them with sanitizer, and things like that, just because it's on its way to be boiled for several hours.
And you are producing a mash, or you are producing a product that is separate from beer. When you say you're making a beer for the distillery, it's different from the beer that you're making on the beer side. Yeah,
exactly. There are no hops. So basically, like a beer mash goes, and I call it a beer mash because it uses all malted barley or wheat or rye or whatever. Most breweries use the off-grade. But brewer, we've already got it here, so might as well, and makes a fantastic product. So basically, we mash in normal. We'll do a rest at 120. Again, try to convert as much of that starch to sugar as possible. Then we'll sit at 148, and then we'll bump it up to 180, and we'll hold it at 180 for a little bit, an hour and a half. And then just because we are a brewery, we already have a lauter tun kind of set up, and so we'll go ahead and lauter, separate the grain from the wort, and then it just kind of hits every tank because that's just how it's plumbed. We'll go with the kettle. Once the kettle's full, we'll drain it, send it to the whirlpool. Once the whirlpool's full, it's a standard knockout, chilling, add yeast. We do boil for a little bit, 10-15 minutes, because we are a brewer. We don't want to get anything like infection-wise, like especially in our heat X and all down the line. But yeah, most breweries, we would fill our fermenters up in a single day, and then we'd actually fill the reaction tank and let it ferment in the reaction tank. So that way when we would spend 2 days doing stripping runs, we'd empty everything, and then we would CIP everything while we were doing the spirit run. And so once the spirit vessel, so we'd have a vessel that we'd put our spirit runs in. Once it was full, whether that took 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or a month, then we would start processing it further, which would be chilling it. Raw alcohol has a lot of proteins. Kind of think of it as chill haze. If you ever freeze like your uncle's moonshine in the freezer, it'll get pretty cloudy. It doesn't look very approachable at all. And so we'll freeze it. That'll actually precipitate out just kind of like a chill haze. It'll all settle at the bottom of the tank. And then if it's vodka, it's run through a charcoal filter. If it's any other spirit, it can be run through a beer filter. To strip all that out, and then from there we send it to an agitation tank, which is where we get it to the final proof. So we add reverse osmosis water to it, the purest water that's also carbon filtered, and so the fluoride's removed, everything artificial's removed from the water. And then I've seen some distilleries actually add hard water salts to it at that point to get a distinct flavor, but then again that also makes it a little cloudy. Depends on if it's going to whiskey, which will sit in a barrel for a long time, or gin, which is pretty much just being bottled. It kind of depends on what spirit you're making. And then it goes straight to the bottling machine. And it's being agitated the whole time because the water and alcohol will separate out. And so it's got an agitation going all the time. And a really good distilling volumes for 750 milliliter bottles is about 60 to 70 cases per run. And when you think about that in beer terms, that's not very much. For example, here at Core, we have to do 1,500 cases, which, is a couple fermenters worth barrel-wise of beer, but then we hope to do 6,000 barrels of beer this year. So to put it in perspective, there is a lot less labor involved in this. Mostly I'll just be watching this and turning valves. I'll be doing other things here in the brewery because you can walk away from this for some time. But.
So what's the ABV of the beer, quote unquote, that you're before distilling? What are you trying to hit?
I aim for 6.5 to 7, using a 50% corn mash or flaked corn. Very little starches provided by that, and so that's why the Pilsner base extremely helps out with that.
So you could use if something goes crazy with a run of your regular beer, you could use it as the source for the alcohol.
Yeah, actually, that was a couple of practicing runs I did. With beer, though, anything hopped the bitterness is actually going to come through quite a bit. We're doing some modifications to our still. We're adding what they call a Carter head, which will be a chamber where we can direct the flow of some of the vapor through this container that holds mostly, doing it for gin, but we can also do it for hops, do some dry hop stuff, really kind of experimental with herbal whiskeys and dry hop whiskeys. Whiskeys are easily the IPA of the distilling world. Everybody has to have a whiskey, and it has to be, multiple variations of whiskey. The guy I learned from in Montana, he's opened his own whiskey distillery in Baltimore this summer. He pretty much taught me, he's like, just, go to the feed store, grab your ingredients, come back, put it in the reaction tank, follow these steps, and it's easy. We actually had the distillery temperature gauges set up to where we could sit at the bar in the distillery tasting room and just look in and see where we were, because it's such a hands-off process. It makes for some long days, but then again, that's why there's a chair here, a nice comfy chair, is you can just, after the rest of your work's done, just kind of put your feet up, enjoy the day, and just kind of literally watch water boil and kind of trickle out like a water fountain into these containers. It's pretty.
So you've talked a lot of science in the process. Where does your artisanals, where do your artisanal skills come in? Is there an opportunity to be an artist in this process?
Oh yeah, for sure. This is kind of just drone work, the actual distilling part of this process. Where the artisanal approach comes in is actually at the very beginning with the mash creation, which is just like a beer creation. And then also, the blending. Whiskey's known for its blending. Specifically, Scotch is known for its blending. In fact, most Scotches are produced by just blending barrels together. And the real artisanal approach is, the type of barrel, the wood it's made out of. For whiskey, it's got to be oak with a char level of number 3 or number 4. Anything else is just kind of open-ended. The TTB actually has regulations on what you can call it. Like, for example, bourbon has to be made with 51% or higher corn to be called bourbon and aged in, a barrel with these specifications. Straight Kentucky bourbon is what can only come out of Bourbon County. And so there's all these regulations for all these alcohols, what you can call what. And so that kind of limits, your mash creation a little bit. But then the blending, barrels in the same room, even stacked at different heights, will age differently. And so you're constantly, you can imagine at a brewery, the 55-gallon barrels. Well, in distillery, we like to use small barrels, like 5, 10-gallon size. You'll see a distillery that cranks out, like 5 barrels of distilled product a month is using 10-gallon barrels. And they'll just have a room that's just lined with them. And there's always, the blenders in there are always just kind of moving them around. Like, I'm going to take this pallet from the corner, top right corner, and this wall. I'm going to put it all the way over here next to the door. And then, there's all this big talk about 6-month whiskeys, 18-month whiskeys, how long the whiskey stays in the barrel. Oftentimes, they're not actually aged that long. It's just how they taste. So a blender will go in and be like, I like how this tastes now. It's 15 months old. We're selling it as 18-month, but it tastes like it's 18-month. And so the palate sophistication is really extreme to pick out all the nuances. In fact, here in a bit, we can go and look. We hope to establish our own cooperage here at Core because there's a 3-year wait on whiskey barrels. And so we have some charred oak spirals that we're aging some whiskey in. And the only difference in between our moonshine product and what will eventually be our whiskey product is that aging process.
And then that could feed back into the beer side, right? You could then age beer. I guess it's impractical to age beer at this scale on 5 and 10 gallon barrels, but you could use your own whiskey barrels to age some barrel-aged beers.
Yeah, well, the smaller barrel allows for more surface contact, which will speed up the aging process. And so that's why the small barrels are there. And so for beer, we would just have to have a ton of 5-gallon barrels, which we will eventually once the cooperage gets up and going. And, we can always put in an order to ourselves for bigger barrels that we then can use. But yeah, like the real distinction between moonshine and whiskey is just that aging process. And I believe the line is 3 months. Really, anything aged longer than 3 months, you get into a lot of whiskey flavors.
And as a home brewer, a 5-gallon barrel sounds like a lot of fun to play with. So, that'll be an incentive for me to maintain my friendship with you guys so that maybe if you have a spare one sitting around.
We will. We've actually, a lot of Scotch is what they call sea aged, and you'll really dig this. It's what they'll just load barrels on a ship and just let it bob up and down with the waves off the coast, and that greatly speeds up the aging process. And they're doing the same thing. They're like, well, I'm going to take this barrel here that's all the way to the front of the ship. I'm going to move it all the way back. And we're actually talking about renting, space like a pontoon on Beaver Lake to put barrels on to kind of have like an Ozark version of that.
Well, you could do at a chicken hatchery. They have a machine that tilts the eggs automatically every so often. There's people working in the chicken industry here in Northwest Arkansas. They could design you something, to have your own hatchery for little barrels.
Yeah, that's been discussed quite a bit as well. Really the skies are pretty limitless for us right now. It's really cool. Yeah, it is time we're at 83 degrees roughly, and it's time to get the water flowing. So that way we're pulling the coldest water we can, which is going to influence, the ABV and the proof of the spirit. As I mentioned earlier, the colder it is outside, the more pure alcohol that comes out. It's really interesting how weather affects this whole process. So right now, the high-pitched wine is water going through the red hose to the top of the deflagonator. So it sends the cold water from the top, which is the hottest point of vapor, all the way to the bottom, then comes back out the top, and then goes straight to our drain. And then we've got water kind of just trickling there into the condenser, so that way we kind of maintain that temp. There's about 5 barrels of water in there, and I have accidentally opened the valve at the wrong time and it's all flying that direction. What's really cool about this still, I forgot to mention, is it's automatically solenoid control. It makes it's part of my language, a bitch, when you're doing a stripping run, because you want to heat this up as fast as possible. But it pulses the steam when it gets close to the set point. This is terrific for spirit runs because I'll bump up the temperature all the way up to 60, and then we'll slow to a crawl from there, because I'll let it pulse all the way up. Because at most I'm doing one spirit run, because it takes about 40 barrels worth of beer to get enough alcohol, which ends up being about 2 barrels. When you think about it, multiply 6.5 times your barrel, and that's the most you hope to get, but that also includes all your wasteful alcohols, your methanol, your isopropyl. But yeah, like all the flavors that come in what we call either neutral spirits or unaged spirits, all comes from like the yeast esters and the malt choices. It's really cool. Like you can taste the corn provides a black pepper kind of note to the product that's going to come out. And it also, the malted barley, the Pilsner and the Dexter malt make it really sweet. If you don't mind, we can go over. Let's smell this whiskey.
Okay. Let's walk. Okay, so now we're in another room. What are we looking at here?
So this is the same moonshine recipe. I forgot to mention this is a 110-year-old recipe that my great-grandfather did. He was actually arrested for running. I always wondered why my family was really into cars. And I guess the family business was always like where they would fix up their shine running vehicles.
That's the roots of NASCAR, after all.
Yeah. So this is the recipe, and like I said, it's a 3-year wait for barrels. And so this is some toasted oak spirals.
Oh man, that smells great.
And so you can really kind of smell the sweetness from the malt. But really, we call the barrel the Band-Aid of the distilling industry, because if this tastes bad, I'll just leave it in here for another 3 months, And the barrel really takes care of you. Right now we're getting a heavy vanilla, caramel, and then mostly the Dexter malt provides a lot of that body. I kind of describe it as when I smell like a full-bodied stout, it kind of has that kind of heaviness going on to it.
Yeah, and the color has changed, taking on the color of the oak.
Yes, and I'll come by and give this a good rousing about once a week, really kind of agitate it. I mean, it's really cool. You can actually see the color coming out of the oak, and dissipating into it. But this has only been in there 2 weeks. With the spirals, our surface area is much higher. So we're hoping to squeeze a 6-month whiskey out around May, which would only be about 2.5 months.
That smells great.
And,
now, and this 225-gallon plastic jug, and it doesn't look like there's much in there.
No, that's actually about 20 gallons, and it's what I call barrel proof. It's a little bit higher proof than what we'll bottle it at, but it's got enough water so it just doesn't readily evaporate. And it kind of, influences the extraction of the barrel products. You can kind of see there's some copper, food grade copper floating around in there to scrub out the sulfur. Because I put 5-gallon buckets of what will come out of the still today just in here. So this hasn't changed. I've done 1 spirit run on this, and then we might filter it. But other than that, it's ready to go. This is 80 proof or 40% alcohol. When it comes out of the still at 160 proof, it's other than the sulfur, it's extremely smooth. But then the copper kind of really takes care of that. So this is about 60 bottles worth or 10 cases of whiskey. So whiskey production is very, very limited. And, moonshine will crank out probably 60 cases every other week due to the turnaround time. Whiskey will probably crank out 60 cases a quarter. But then again, we were talking about, possibly selling tickets that'll guarantee you a bottle of the whiskey. And a lot of distilleries do that every time they release seasonals. Like Balcones in North Texas, every time they release a whiskey, they'll sell a $60 ticket, and that guarantees you a chance to buy that bottle.
Kind of like Star Wars figures.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to do that with anything that's that highly sought after and in high demand that you just can't produce at level. So
this is great. Well, Nathan, it's exciting to get back with you and to see what you're up to, and I can't wait to see where you'll go from here.
Yeah, we hope to have our distilled products out around May. Right now, we're just starting with our moonshine, and then eventually we'll get to this whiskey. Later, I've got a raspberry liqueur. So there's no shelf life issues. It's all kind of stuff just kind of sitting or hanging around. We're actually aged it on raspberries and kind of made it like a brandy. And then I've got, we're working on a 23% ESB, where I, take an ESB, I distill it off, and then we add alcohol to it, freeze it, and really increase the concentration of it that way. And then, so we're kind of looking at that, because here in Arkansas, we can make up to 23% ABV beer. And so since we're one of like 6 or 7 distillery and breweries in the U.S., I'd like to try to take advantage of all the kind of tools like that we have. And then I've also got some Arkansas-made sorghum molasses, and we're going to actually, when the still can be open for 10 or 11 days, we're actually going to ferment a molasses in there. I'm kind of tossing around the idea of a sour mash rum with that molasses, but it's really cool. Obviously the water's local, and then all that molasses will be local. And once we get to the point where we can receive, semi-loads of corn, then we'll have all local corn used in our moonshine and things like that. Right now, we're just we're at the step just past the pilot level. We're doing this for real, but at the same time, we're not like gas pedal all the way down like we are with beer, moving forward.
Cool. Well, thanks, Nathan.
Yeah, thank you, James. Let's go find Jesse. He's walking around.
Yeah. Find the boss. Well, Jesse Core, every time I come up here, you guys have done something more expansive and different and adding things on, and it's incredible. Are you fitting the growth curve that you wanted to fit?
Yes. I mean, that's the cool thing about craft industry, and not just craft beer, but also the craft spirits, craft cider. There's always something new to do. There's always another fun angle to take. So for us, there's never a dull moment. So pretty excited to be moving forward on the craft spirit side.
Yeah, how does that fit into the business?
Perfectly. Craft spirits, or distilling, is just the natural progression of brewing anyway. So we already have all this infrastructure in place. We can brew a lot of beer. Whiskey's distilled beer minus hops. So it was a very natural progression for us, and allows us to be more creative, and it also allows us to use Arkansas raw material. Lots of corn, apples, peaches, grapes, and you can't really do that on the beer side because barley's our primary raw material, and that's just not available. But we're pretty excited to be able to use some Arkansas stuff around here.
So what what kinds of products are we going to see from you from the distillery?
Yeah, the first one we're releasing is called Hangin' Judge Whiskey. And, I'm a Fort Smith guy, and so it took us a little while, but we got the name and the image of old Judge Parker. It's going on our bottles, so it's been approved. So it is it's a corn-based whiskey that's going in some pretty cool bottles, cool labels, and I think it's going to be a nice representation of Arkansas whiskey.
And Nathan's all excited, and he's thinking about the experimental spirits and such. And I got a whiff of the oak aged spirit that he's got going on there. It smells great.
Yes.
But this is a different world. I mean, and this is admittedly a departure from this podcast because we're supposed to be all about home brewing, although home distilling is illegal,
right?
And there's really probably no foreseeing in the future where it would become legal. But it is an extension of the craft.
Absolutely. I mean, again, the hardest part about making good whiskey is making good beer. Because if you produce crap, distilling crap, you're still going to get crap. So if you can make a really good beer and distill it, you're going to end up with a really good distillate as well. So for us, I mean, this is what's so fun for Nathan and I, or any craft guy or home brewer, is that we get to try whatever blows our hair back, and we were looking at some different grape sources, persimmon whiskey. I mean, who knows? Persimmons, they're good for like this 0.2 second window between it falls and hits the ground, but there's a lot of great raw material in this area that we would like to take. I mean, Arkansas Black Apple. There's just a lot of fun spirits to be had around here.
And I guess if you wanted to play with spirits as a home brewer, you could take some distilled spirits and then age it yourself, like a neutral distilled spirit, and age it yourself on different woods and trying different flavorings in that direction as well.
Yeah, you could just get a neutral spirit and try different things. I understand why the government is hesitant, because it's not only about taxes. I mean, there's also a danger factor with brewing. Yeah, you can burn yourself with the boil or the mash, but you can really hurt yourself up by blowing yourself up through a still. So I would say, you could still there's certainly a lot of things you could do with all the different flavorings and really produce a unit. I mean, there's a lot of distilleries out there that buy product from contract manufacturers and then brand it and add their own special flavorings, and they've got their own product. So I don't see why home distillers could not do the same thing.
Now let's talk about beer. You have opened. We're sitting in the tasting room attached to the brewery, and you've opened another tasting room in Rogers, and I understand that there are more of those in the works.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what's cool about being in Arkansas is we've been able to see successfully what's been done in San Diego and Portland and Boulder. And the way this is more of our tasting rooms are extensions of the brewery. It allows our patrons to come in, not just one or two, but 10 to 15 of our beers at any given time. Helps with brand loyalty, helps with brand recognition. They're also just, anybody goes to our tasting rooms knows they're just a very laid-back place to hang out, have a couple beers after work, decompress, get in that right state of mind before you head home. And, we're looking at, we got one opening in Harbor in end of April. We have one in Fort Smith opening in May. We have one opening up. We've signed a lease or letter of intent for Fayetteville as well. And again, this is nothing more. We work with local restaurants to carry their food because, believe it, man, I'm a god awful cook, and you don't want me dealing with your food. So what we do is we're working with Flying Burrito and Harbor. So it's great for them because people come in and drink our beer. They want some food. We'll just bring over some burritos for you. Up in Rogers, Barriola's is a customer, a partner of ours. So it allows us to not only push our brand and get more of our beer in people's hands, but it also allows us to support the community and our local partners.
And because you are, do you have to be a distributor to do that, are all those tasting rooms essentially like this tasting room that's attached to your facility?
Yes. So we're able to operate our other tasting rooms under Core Brewing and Distilling Company because we only sell our product. It is the UK model. Like we said before, you don't go into a Samuel Smith pub and ask for a Fuller's. You just don't do it. So we're selling our own brand, our own products, and so we can deliver our product to ourselves. But we work with our distributors. I mean, I don't want to be a distributor, but we work out a reasonable rate that they'll transfer the product from our manufacturing facility to our tasting rooms.
And so the profit margin, you've got a selfish reason for a
Yes.
business reason for having all these tasting rooms is that there aren't middle people.
That's correct. And we're not serving food. We have minimal staff, so it's really all about the beer. That's it. It's about the beer and the culture we're trying to drive here of just being good people making good beer. You just come out and hang out, have a beer, and relax.
Very cool. Well, what else is coming up? What else have you got up your sleeve? Or is there?
Oh my goodness. Well, 15 is shaping up to be a really big year for us. We've hired the former J.B. Hunt Director of Operations as our VP of Operations here. We have hired Matt Biles, who's former sales manager for Boulevard, as our Director of Sales and Marketing here. We're definitely making a larger regional push this year. Nathan's doing a fantastic job. Our quality program is second to none in the area. We are working with U of A U of A and a couple other people on some custom proprietary yeast strain projects. We got more pubs coming down the pipe, and of course, I've been very active in the legislative stuff, which was it's a huge pain in the ass, but necessary evil. If you're not involved, then you get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. So we've been very involved, and so it's that went favorable for the industry. So we will be manufacturing cider very soon as well.
Awesome. Well, congratulations, Jesse, and keep up the good work.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, come back and see us soon. There's always something else coming on down here, and we've purchased those two buildings, and now we're at over 20,000 square feet of space, and who knows? We might even make money in this deal eventually.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Matt. Good seeing you.
Well, that was a fun day, fun morning. I've never seen a still in operation, and Nathan does a great job of explaining things, and I'll post a picture of the still on our Facebook page so you can kind of see what's going on. I was able to feel and taste a tiny bit of the heads and compare that to the better stuff that comes after. So I'm really interested to see how the final product comes out in the end. Don't forget to send in your Homebrew Heroics story to our contest, giving away 2 free registrations to the Homebrew Conference in San Diego. The entry deadline is April 10th, and the entry form and all the details are at beerandwinejournal.com. So good luck to everybody entering that. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say hey, howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com or fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. Please don't forget to tell us where you're from. But if you're sending in a Homebrew Heroic story, be sure to use the form on beerandwinejournal.com, because that's where we're collecting those entries. Check out our support link where you can throw a couple of bucks into the tip jar by subscribing financially to the podcast. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site, and you can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store too. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. If there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online at our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We greatly appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Pro Rack 2-bike hitch platform and Bulbright 40-watt nostalgic Edison squirrel cage style bulb 6-pack. Thanks again. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget you can also join the American Homebrewers Association and subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com as well. That's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer, production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website, provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.